Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome to Seed to Plate channel. My name is Brooke. Welcome to week 17, 18, whatever week it is. I've been doing this since the first of the year. Still trying to keep track of the weeks. Not going that well for me. This week, we're going to talk about my failed onions. I don't really believe anything's a failure in the garden. I think there's only lessons to be learned in the garden. I had never grown onions before. These were grown from sets, and I think I pretty much know what happened, but yeah. Basically, I planted out this bed of onions in January, the same time everybody else plants onions in this part of the country, and most people's onions are like harvestable right now. They're big and beautiful. Mine are not, which is fine. I have a couple of good sized ones, but I think I know what happened. So let's go harvest some onions. We'll bring them back, and then I'll tell you what I think happened to my onions. Okay, so now that we have all of the onions picked, I want to sit down and kind of talk to you guys about what I think happened, because these are not your typical, big bulb onions. These are both white and yellow onions. They are for my zone. And see, I had some onions that turned out like this, right? That's not a bad size. And then I had some that did this. So these onions will not go to waste. I'm going to make, these are gonna be perfect for bacon onion jam. So they will definitely get used. And I think a few things happened when I planted these. I did not amend my soil at all before I planted these. I didn't do anything to it. I didn't loosen the soil. I did not put compost down. Like, I quite literally did nothing to the soil. I think that was probably one of my biggest mistakes. I'm just not sure that these onions had enough fertilizer and energy, and I did try and put fertilizer on them a couple of times, but I just don't think it did much. So there's that. Also, the bed that I put them in. So me and another garden lady I know, her name's Rita, she's at my community plot. Her and I planted our onions at the same exact time. The difference is the community plot gets at least 10 hours of sun, like at least. It gets a ton of sunshine, and this bed, when I first planted them, it got a ton of sun, and then because of the way the trees at our back fence grow and the way that the sun moves, there was a period of time right in the middle of their growing cycle where they just did not get very good sun. They got really dappled lighting. They didn't get direct sun. So these onions are just now back to getting really direct sun. Now, you're probably wondering, some of these probably could have created a bigger bulb. Like this one, this I probably could have left in the ground and it would have created like a bigger actual bulb onion. But when you are urban gardening, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. So we're now into May. These onions were supposed to be, I believe, only like 4 months. I planted them in January. I noticed that they were not growing on par with how they should, and so I made the decision to go ahead and pull them. Now, the reason I made that decision is because being an urban gardener, my space is very limited, and I like to have stuff that's producing. So leaving this in the ground for another month when I could get something started now, that's just kind of where my head was at. So I still want to do onions next year because I had just enough success to make me curious. So I'm probably just going to dedicate a spot to them at the community plot next year where they get more sun, because Rita's onions are beautiful and she's got them fairly close together. So I don't think it's going to take up a ton of room. But we eat onions a lot, and so I do think it's definitely important to have onions and to grow them. I just think I had them in the wrong spot, in the wrong conditions, etc., etc. So the reason I chose to go ahead and pull them was they've been in the ground for at least 4 months, and I just wasn't willing to let them have any more time, because what I'm planting in that bed next is okra. And I'm really excited about okra this year. Okra does really well here in Central Texas. I have a few different varieties that I'm pretty excited about growing. And so we're gonna plant some okra tomorrow morning. And I've never done this with seeds. People do it frequently, but I've never done it where you actually soak the seeds overnight before you plant them. I think okra is pretty advantageous to do that from what I'm reading. But that's all gonna be okra, and I'm real pumped about it. I like okra, and I'm super excited to grow it. So let me go get my okra seed and show you what okra we're gonna be planting tomorrow. So the varieties of okra that I am going to be planting tomorrow are, this is just a regular old green variety. This is called Clemson Spineless. So this is the Clemson Spineless, and then I have a red burgundy, and I'm not gonna lie, the flowers on this one get me every time. They're so pretty. And then this one, this is called Jing Orange. Now, this is one seed packet that I got at a nursery. This was packed for 2019, which was 2 years ago. So I'm probably just gonna try and soak all of these seeds and see what I end up with. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick these okra seeds in water, and I think I'm just gonna separate them based on the variety. And then that means between today and tomorrow I need to amend that bed, and I'm not gonna till it, but I am gonna loosen up the soil a little bit, because as I was pulling the onions out I was realizing that the soil is somewhat compacted. I will see you tomorrow, and we are going to plant some okra together. How's it going? It is the next day. So wanted to show you, these are the okra seeds that I've been soaking overnight, and I labeled them like a smart person. So we have the Jing Orange, the Clemson Spineless, and the red burgundy. And I've prepped the bed, and actually as I was prepping the bed, this is why it's very important that you not just get familiar with your plants, but get familiar with the soil that you're trying to grow the plants in. Once I started really looking and feeling the soil with my hands, it was really compact. So I'm not entirely surprised that the onions had a hard time, because the dirt was just very compacted. I unfortunately don't have a pitchfork or a broad fork here with me at this house. But I think the okra will be okay. Okra is pretty aggressive in terms of root development. So I think the okra is going to be okay, but certainly now I understand why the crops that I've put in that bed have had a hard time over the last 6 months or so. So I think once we get into fall veg, where we're doing lettuces and kales and stuff like that, I will likely either get a broad fork or a pitchfork and actually aerate that bed. That being said though, as I was kind of taking just this hand tool, I just took this guy and tried to break up the soil a bit, just so that these, as they were forming their initial roots, they just had an inch or two of nice loose soil. But yeah, so that's why it's really important to actually get your hands in the dirt that you're working with, to just make sure that the environment is correct for the plants that you're trying to plant. So I did soak more of these seeds than I needed, and with the Jing Orange I soaked way more seeds than I really needed, and that's just because they are older seeds. They were packed for 2019, which means they're probably from 2018, so 3 years probably completely fine, but just to be safe I did more than I needed to. Now the directions on the packet for spacing were a little bit different. Also, usually that spacing stuff is for farmers, not necessarily home gardeners. So I tend to put things closer together than I should. My tomatoes, for example, they recommend tomatoes be 2 feet apart. I only do 12 to 18 inches. I do think 12 inches is a little too close together, so I go by 18 inches. These I'm going to be putting in 12 inches apart. So the bed that I'm using is a 4 foot by 8 foot bed. I have 3 different kinds of okra, and I'm going to be planting 2 seeds per space. So let's go plant some okra seeds. So I watered in the okra really well because I had put fresh, dry compost on it, and I just wanted to make sure it was nice and saturated. But I'm also thinking now I might plant some stuff in the corners of the bed, like some flowers like I have in the squash bed. And also I now have 3 grow bags available to put something in. So gonna think about that and see what that move is. But for now we've got okra planted, the onions are harvested. I think I'm going to make some bacon onion jam today. Few exciting things to tell you about in the backyard garden before we close this out. First and foremost, we had a bird's nest, and the bird's nest was over here in this rack of things that shouldn't be there, but it's fine. And this bird was actually like getting all of the caterpillars and all of these bugs out of my garden and feeding it to the little baby birds. And we actually, me and my friend were sitting out here last night, we actually got to see the birds leave the nest, which was really cool. So the nest is now abandoned, which means I probably need to up my pest prevention game because I don't have a bird here. But man, it was so nice. In here, that is a blueberry. I did make a big mistake when I transplanted that blueberry bush, and I did not give it any kind of appropriate fertilizer. So blueberries really like a very acidic fertilizer. I didn't do that, and so a lot of the blossoms just fell off and never actually made blueberries. But we have one blueberry, which is exciting. So I got some Fox Farm Acid Lovers fertilizer that I'll be fertilizing those guys with here. It should have been last week, but I'm gonna do it this week. So that's very exciting. We have one blueberry. I anticipate next year will be much better. And then we are also just starting to get freaking loaded down with tomatoes. So we've got a bunch of tomatoes on the vine, and they're gonna take forever to ripen. This right here, this is a black print snapdragon. These are extremely beautiful snapdragons. This guy's kind of falling because he's heavy, but beautiful snapdragons coming up. And then the other thing I wanted to make mention of, which you're gonna see my shadow here. This is the time of year you start looking for squash vine borer eggs. I think I got all of them off of this plant, but they're tiny and they're brown. And oh, there's one. I doubt you're gonna be able to see it because it's so tiny. But I've been coming out here every day and searching these for squash vine borer eggs. Decimated my summer squash last year. I was so sad. My plant was looking so big and healthy, and then all of a sudden it like put off one fruit that looked really weird and funky. And so I took the plant down, but once I took the plant down and I ripped it out, I realized that the like stem was like mushy. Sure enough, I did some research and squash vine borers. So they literally lay these little like brown speckled eggs on your plant that looks like a piece of dirt, and the worm of the moth, because it comes from a moth, it burrows into the vine and eats it from the inside. Obviously not good. So I saw this weird bug like flying around my squash plants, and sure enough, that's what it was. So that's just something to look out for this time of year, especially in the south. Squash vine borers are relentless. I come out here every day and scrape off new eggs. So yeah, just something to keep an eye out for. This is my Berries Crazy cherry plant. And these clusters, I cannot believe how big these clusters are of tomatoes. It is wild. And then these are the Sunrise Bumblebee. And they haven't turned orange yet, but they've already got this really cool striping, which is pretty cool. So, all right, y'all, thanks so much for watching. I love sharing everything with you guys, even the stuff that doesn't always go as planned, like my onions, but it's all great stuff. Gardening is full of lessons. Gardening's never full of failures. It's full of lessons. So, onward and upward. We are past onion season here, and we are now entering okra season. So between the tomatoes and the squash and the okra, everything's just gonna really start booming here pretty soon. All right, y'all, thanks so much for watching and being here in the garden with me to pull my onions and plant my okra. And next week, I will be taking you guys out to the country to plant out my grandma's sunflowers, as well as help my mom with her garden bed. So stay tuned for that, and happy gardening. We will see you next week.